I feel like this is for short people. All right, so now for the main event. Okay, everybody, just a little bit about me. I haven't done a slide, but my name's Sean Gobey. I'm a technical artist. I work at Gameloft. And today we're doing You're Probably Lighting Wrong. So it is a very clickbaity title. The talk is not going to be about how to light, like 3-point lights and whatever. It's going to go over mainly what Unreal is doing under the hood. So first thing we're going to do is what's going on, making sense of exposure and values in Unreal Engine 5. And once we understand that, we're going to do the physically based lighting, so approach it through physically based values, right? And then we're going to look at the tone mapper and how Unreal deals with the light and then it has to present it to us. And then we're going to look at clouds and fogs, and that's a little bit, cart before the horse, but bear with me. And then we'll get to do some color grading. And then if we have enough time, we'll do a demo, maybe 2 demos, all right? So generally when we light, we want to set up, like with your camera, if any of you here use DSLRs, you set up your camera and then you have your lights, or technically you have your light and then your camera. And then once you've taken your photo, you go into Photoshop or Lightroom, and when you import that raw image, they say, hey, what do you want to do with exposure, light values, and and then you do your color grading. But today what we're going to go through is the lights, because there's a lot to learn about how Unreal deals with their lights. And then once we understand lights, we're going to deal with how Unreal uses the camera, and then from that, the tone mapper, and then we'll do some color grading. So what's going on here? Excuse me. So firstly, we have this scene, and there is no lights. We have emissive materials, all right? And it's very blobby. We're using lumen. There won't be any light baking here. And if we just throw in a directional light, it turns on, it illuminates the place. Then we're like, okay, that's fair enough. You can even see the emissive light is still super bright. So we went from nothing to a directional light, but our emissive fire is still blown out. Okay, so the next thing you look at is the directional light, and it has a value of 10 lux. So what is 10 lux? If we change that number to 100,000 lux, you can see there's a little bit of a flash, and then there's no change except the emissive fire is more dim, all right? So essentially what's happening is Unreal has a lot, it's child-proofed. Epic has child-proofed Unreal Engine, right? So it always looks good. And there's a eye adaptation visualizer, which you should probably turn on all the time. And if we change it from 100,000 lux to 10 lux, don't worry, I'm going to talk about lux in a minute, but you can see what's happening is this green bar is showing us that Unreal is adjusting the exposure. So it always wants to get a perfect exposure. So essentially, you change it from 100,000 lux to 10 lux, and it's just like, what do you want? I'm trying to get a good exposure here, right? And this is some of the child-proofing. And once you understand this, you can then kind of go, okay, so there's a lot of child-proofing in other places, right? And also another thing that we need to be aware of is that we're not simulating our eye, we're simulating a camera, because our eyes have a greater dynamic range than cameras. And even if cameras had a really good dynamic range, our monitors don't. So we have to kind of work within that paradigm. So then, what is lux? Lux, or a luminous flux, is equal to 1 lumen per square meter and is the total amount of light that falls onto a surface, everybody. So then, what is lumen? Lumen is the total amount of light emitted by a source in all directions. If you're anything like me, you're like, okay, great, I still don't get it. So I made this little graphic. So lumen is the amount of light coming off of a surface, and lux is the amount of light that is hitting a surface. And the reason why you use lux to calculate that is if you have a bunch of lights and they're all hitting a surface, the lux goes up, but the amount of light coming off of those lights is the same, right, if it's the same light. And there's another thing that you'll see in Unreal called CD, or candela. And you're like, oh my goodness. And what candela is the amount of light in an angle going in a direction. And the reason why we use that is because this little light here is emitting the same amount of light as in the previous slide, except because we have a cone and we're pointing it in a direction like in a flashlight, the amount of light going in that direction or in the direction of the flashlight is more. So how do you calculate that? So generally just use lumen and lux is the surface. So in Unreal, the only light that uses lux is the directional light. And the reason is because this is the sun. And if you start using lumen values with the sun, there aren't enough zeros to actually get that, so we'll be dealing in huge values. So you just let's just use lumen. Now, the directional light by default is 10 lux. So, what's going on here? So if you have a look at this card, it's just a stepped card going from 0 to 1. And let me just laser pointer. All right. And if you have a look over here, this is 1 at the top and 0.75, 0.8. As we pan across, there's this little box over here, and this area here is a version, it's just a blown up version of that. But when we're on 0, the lux is 0. When we were on 0.25, the lux is 2.5. And when we're on 0.5, it is 5, and so on and so forth. And when we get to 1, the value is 10 lux. So what's happening is that if you have a perfectly white surface and your directional light is a value, in this case 10 lux, the amount of light that is reflected is 10 lux. So this is where that value comes from, right? And even says here, it says illuminance meter, forced to be perfect white diffuse over a surface. Which brings us to another little side note. Physically based values and textures. So any lighting person will tell the environment and texture artist, please can we use physically based lighting values? And hopefully from the previous explanation, you'll realize that it's because of the light reflecting off of these surfaces. So I wonder how many people here have projects where the characters look good in light, and then you go into the darkness, and everything is incredibly dark. And it's generally because of the amount of light that your surface or your diffuse textures is reflecting. Interestingly, if you press and hold the backslash button next to or under your backspace key, this little Macbeth chart pops up, and you can zoom in it around the screen just to have a look at the light values. How many people here knew about that? Okay, 0.2% of you. All right, so let's get back to lighting. So we have our directional light. Now we need to add in a skylight. We need to set it to movable and turn on real-time capture, and then add a sky atmosphere. So you can see that already we kind of get a little bit more unified. Notice the bounce light and how the scene kind of comes together. The next thing we want to do is, again, turn on mesh distance field visualization. Now I want to touch on this is because if your models don't have the correct granularity or mesh distance field, lumen doesn't work. All right, it is on by default and it brings it in, but sometimes you need to adjust the the resolution of it. So if you aren't using a project with lumen and you need mesh distance fields for something, you need to turn it on in your static mesh. But if your project is using it, all of your models will generally have mesh distance fields. They'll create it, whether you turn this off or on. So that could be a gotcha, because sometimes if things aren't working, like, oh, it didn't have mesh distance fields, it creates it in general. If you have any foliage, you need to turn on two-sided field generation, so you don't get weird lighting. And what that does with the distance field is the front side of your model or your mesh, and you have your distance field, so it's the distance from your mesh forward, and the two-sided can say, oh, okay, it's negative, so we can calculate how far we are from the back. All right, back to lighting. If the directional light value is 10 lux, what should local lights be? So this is the big thing. You put in your light, oh, this is great, I like this, okay, 10 lux. This giant fireball in the sky, great. What is my sconce, right? And these are the things that we need to start figuring out. So this is where physically based lighting comes in. So here is a chart. It is not my chart, but I've edited the chart. And if you Google cheat sheet physically based lighting, there is a website somewhere that has really good values, and I'll leave it at that. So if you have a look here, we're going to do something like noon. So if you go, okay, noon, 100,000 lux. Okay, great. So if we go here, we set our light to 100,000 lux. And then we're going to update our camera sensor. In order to do that, we need to get a post-process volume. So we grab our post-process volume, we turn the unbound off. And this bit can be a little bit confusing because the post-process volumes do quite a lot of things. Not only do they handle camera settings, but also the tone mapper, and they do color grading. And for simplicity's sake, Epic's kind of put them in the same place, and not quite in the correct order either. So the first thing we need to do in the post-process volume is turn off exposure compensation. Again, we're trying to remove all of this child-proofing. All right, so we go from 1 to 0. The next thing we need to do with our camera is like, okay, so our sun is at noon. What does our camera exposure need to be? So we kind of go, okay, so it's sunlit, so we're going to go 14 EV. So we go over here. So you have our eye adaptation turned on, and we change the min EV to 10, because I want to explain something here, and the max to 14. Now you notice down here, we have the exposure range goes from minus 10, which is down here, and the upper range 20, to 10 and 14. And our image gets a little bit darker, and that's because this blue line here is what Unreal wants the exposure to be perfectly exposed, so the bit. And this over here is the min bound is where our exposure is, and it's like we've capped it. It's like you can't go lower than that. And if you have a look here, so we're inside, and now we turn our camera outside, and you can see because our light is at noon, the 100,000 lux, and the exposure, the upper end is 14 EV, when we look outside, you can see it's bang on, 14. When we go inside, it's like, it's a little bit darker in here. Now, for those of you who know the Sun Temple from good old UE4 days, if you go into the back area, it's incredibly dark, right? Now, what you might want to do is start adding lights, but we're not going to do that. Well, we are, but how do we do it? You can see down here, notice this blue exposure, like we're way down, right? And this is where we are here. So we need to add some of the little fire lights. So we go, okay, a local candle light. Okay, let's say an interior light. Okay, 1,000 lumen. And if we have a look here at the color temperature is 1900. Okay, so let's add those lights. We put the lights in, point lights. I think it's like 1,000 lumen, and the temperature is 1900. And it moved it a little bit, but we're still greatly underexposed. So this is where the tone mapper comes in, all right? And what the tone mapper is we're taking the light that's coming in, and then Unreal's going, okay, here's the light. Now I need to present it to you, your light. And it runs it through its own, like, it's not a color grade, but it's a tone mapper, right? So it kind of crushes the blacks a little bit and does stuff with the whites to then go, here you go, all the highlights. So we're essentially developing the negative and then presenting it to us. So the first thing we need to do is, under the film settings, is adjust the toe. And what the toe is, if you look at the bottom here, it's like we're flattening out this curve a little bit in our tone mapper, where we're removing some of the contrast. And I don't know if you can see it there. Yeah, you can a little bit, but we're kind of bumping this up a little bit, okay? We're going from 0.55 to 0.3. And then what I want to do, because now I'm being a little bit arty, is I need to adjust our exposure just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to bring it down to 9 and 12. Then the next thing we need to have a look at is how many people here have used the, when you're developing, there's that, it's, you know, you can use the masks and the ramps to adjust the exposure, right, the local exposure. So essentially what we can do here is bump up the shadows. So it's not grading, we're bumping up the shadows. And in the tone mapper, we're making less contrast in just that area. Right, so if we have a look at the local exposure, you can see that it's kind of mapping anything under this value is a shadow. And if we go outside, you can see it like looks a little bit better. So anything in the red is the local shadow contrast, and anything in the white is, you know, the highlight. So you can see here, here's a before and after. Now it's a lot brighter on the screen here, but there's a tremendous difference between the before and the after. So the next stage we want to do is add some clouds and fogs. Now you would generally do this beforehand, but I didn't want to go down that road, make things confusing. So we're going to add in the exponential height fog. Excuse me. And in that, in the directional light, we want to turn on the light shaft occlusion and the light shaft bloom. And then we want to turn on volumetric fog in the fog. And that's what volumetric fog in this instance does, is you can see it kind of color grades it. It's not like blue everywhere from the sky and the atmosphere. It kind of takes into account the environment and gives it a value. It's volumetric. Then we want to remove the density because it's noon. And push the start distance really far away. So essentially, Sean, why are we adding this? And then finally, color grading. So what we've essentially done now is created a really good negative. We're not color grading or grading a graded image, so to speak. And we're able to bring back, oh, you really can't see it there. We're able to bring back a tremendous amount of detail so that now we can say, okay, our blacks are, you know, this, and instead of taking the graded image and grading it up. So again, I'll just adjust the temperature to make it a little bit cooler, and I'll adjust the tint. And I got to say, I actually really liked the non-graded image. I thought, I was like, this looks great, but I was like, I kind of have to do some color grading to show you all. So adjust the tint. Ah, here we go. Sorry, there's a little Microsoft bug there. And in the global contrast now, we want to jump it up a bit to reintroduce some of the contrast. Shadow saturation, kind of bump that up. So now we're able to isolate bits of the image. Bring up the gamma. Midtones. The highlight contrast, and you can notice it's more happening out here. Come on, man. Out here. And the local exposure shadow contrast. So again, I'm kind of moving it down just a little bit. So now I'm kind of going back into the development. Thanks, Mike. And, you know, a bit of the cheating, but we can do that. So you can see here that this is the before and after. And again, if we go inside, you know, that it's really saturated on there. But if we go really into the den over here, where previously it was like black, but now we have a well-exposed image that you can go inside and outside. And you can, of course, use the different volumes. Here's our outside post-process volume, and you know, move between them. But you don't really have to do that if you know what's going on under the hood. So for the takeaways of this, physically based lighting, use physically based values, use physically based diffuse texture values, use physically based camera exposures. And for your tone mapper, use the toe and the shoulder to reveal shadow and highlight information. Adjust the local exposure if needed. All right, so now I'm going to do a demo. And let's go out of here, go into here. So we have, this is our Sun Temple, OG UE4. Oh, I see what you mean about the mouse, Chris. Okay, and we have nothing but our emissive values. All right, so we want to do something that's overcast. So if I bring across this image, we go, okay, let's go something that's cloudy. So we can go between 5,000 and 20,000 lux. So let's do something like 10,000. So I'm actually going to just bring in the directional light. Directional light. So let's go 10,000. There we go. Jim Carrey's going to jump out. And then we want to bring in, I'll bring in our skylight. Oh. Skylight. Set it to movable and set it to real-time capture. And you'll notice throughout all of this, I'm not turning on whiz-bang features and stuff. It's just trying to get the basics just to make it unified. And then once you do that, you can do all the other, add in all the other things. Sky atmosphere. Okay, there we go. Now we can do our post-process volume. Set it to unbound. And then now, turn off the exposure compensation. Then we want to go our EV. Okay, this is game settings. Make sure game settings is on, everybody. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have our directional light of 10,000. Yep, 10,000. So our exposure value, so we want to kind of go low sun interior, so let's just go around 7. So we get our post-process volume. We'll just put this at 7 and 7, okay? Then we go through the back here. Okay, see this is very, very dark. Oop. So now I want to add some clouds, volumetric clouds. And where are my volumetric clouds? Where do they go? Oh, preparing shaders, of course. And then from the volumetric clouds in our directional light, we need to go down to turning on all of the casting. Cast shadows, atmosphere, like that. Okay. And then now, where is the cloud? Are the clouds casting shadows? Clouds cast shadows. Ah, yeah, okay, they are, that's fine. Okay, good. So then in our post-process volume, we can now add the fog, exponential height fog. You can crank that up, not that one. 0.5. Volumetric. Okay. And then in our post-process volume, so we got 7, 7. Now we want to adjust our local exposure to bring this up to like 0.6. We want to go to our toe. We want to go 0.3. So you can see, where are we? We're around here. And is real time on? Yeah, real time is on. Okay, so now if we go back up, we're going to adjust our exposure a little bit. Turn on our lights. So these are the lights I had before. I just turned them off and on. Yeah, 0.7. Directional light. Maybe let's bring this down to 5. 1, 2, 3. and bring up our exposure. Let's have a look here. 7, let's go 10. Let's go 10 by 10. Now with this cloud, in order to actually get these to not cast shadows, we need to adjust the amount of clouds in our texture, but I'm not going to do that. Directional light. Sorry, post process. Min EV 8. That kind of works. Oh. And then I'm going to just bring down the local exposure is good. That's good. So we can go into our grading. Where is that? So we want to bring down the temperature. Oh, too much. Tint. Global saturation. Come on, buddy. Is that showing the collision? We can adjust the post-process. And then bring it up in the shadows. Oh. So you can see apart from, now these volumetric clouds, I had actually shader put in here where I updated it, but it is not M volumetric. Is this the one? Ah, yeah, that's the one. So we can actually bring this down a little bit more to like 3, 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right, so you can see now the point of all of this is as we're going through, we're updating all of the values, but we're only adjusting our directional light, and we're not going through and having to adjust every single light that we're doing. And we're able to go from outside, out here, to inside in the den, and it having a good exposure, right? And we're not having to like add arbitrary lights. And it's understanding how our tone mapper works and how Unreal ingests light and then what we can do with that. So on that note, we are done. How long was that? Any questions? I kind of zoomed through that. Maybe we can do another demo after the questions.
I'll pass it over to you. Hey, thanks. Really awesome.
Where are you?
I'm here.
Ah, okay. Hello.
Hey. Thanks for going through the tone mapper and sharing that approach.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any benefit in adopting like VFX standards of like making it a linear map and then doing it all in grading, or trying to adopt an ASIS kind of tone curve and do grading? Or really is the creativity left to actually just tone mapping it in the way that we want to?
So Unreal does use the quote-unquote old school method as well, where you can, if we go in under here, in the post-process volume, where you can, I think it's in the, is it in the MISC, where you can actually get color grading LUTs. And that's not quite what you're talking about. You can implement ACEs, but it's a little bit of a headache. And even if you talk to the film people, they're like, it like has to work throughout the whole pipeline. But also from my understanding, if you talk to Chris, there's a lot of work that's being done in there. But what this in particular is kind of understanding the physically based lighting values and what Unreal wants, not only from a lighting point of view, but also from a materials point of view. And then once you give it that, how do you deal with that data, right? Does that answer your question? Kind of, not really.
Hello, thank you for the talk.
No worries.
I think that there's also option in the project settings in the rendering. You can choose the color space from the Rec 709, Rec 2020, and ACES. So, do you recommend something to change for the game projects or something like that?
Well, that all depends on where you're going. So again, I mean, if you're going to HDR, then you kind of need to go down those roads. But again, that can get complex quite quickly.
Yes, if you select Rec 2020, all the light calculation will be different, and you need to adjust from also the physical-based values. So if you use a physical-based values, you probably need to use the 2020.
Yes, but also like if you have a look at the physical, like the sun. Yeah, you know, when you're also doing like the true sun without scattering, it's like 130,000 lux. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Anyone else? Hello, thank you. Really good talk. When you move the camera around in Unreal with Lumen really quickly, sometimes there's times where Lumen really struggles to keep up. Are there any solutions that you know of to that problem?
Not that I know of. I think, Chris, that might be something that Chris can talk about, because as you move to the camera, it kind of does its updating. So from what I'm... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, there's a update rate you can trigger in Lumen that's basically like, by default, it's meant to be a bit gradual so that it's kind of running latently, so that it's not as aggressive, I guess. But if you know you're about to do like a big snap because your camera's jumping from here to here or something like that, you can basically be like, no, seriously, prioritize this. I can't remember what the CVAR is. I actually think we moved it to the process volume in 5.0 release. Yeah, in my head, I'm still in what we had in early access. At the time, it was a CVAR. But I think we've moved it in the post-process volume now.
Yeah, so a lot of the things, when we're talking about like ACES and Rec 709, a lot of this stuff is like pipelining things. And along with all of those settings comes different ways of dealing with it. What I'm trying to do here is simplify the process for especially like environment artists and people who don't have a photography background who are coming into this. And it's like, well, this is how it kind of works. Because what I've generally found is people are trying to color grade a tone mapped or color graded image. So if we go here in the post-process volume, right, say for instance, where the toe is, if we go to the show, visualize, eye adaptation, you can see here, if we adjust this toe, if we keep going back, we go like that, and then if we adjust the shoulder, and if we adjust it, we put the slope back, you can see how we're flattening out this curve, and eventually you get to like nothing, right? So it's like the data that you're presented, and then how are we manipulating this before we color grade it, right?
Anyone else? Everyone pointed at you. You have some like supporters here. So.
Hey, if you wanted your camera to mimic the human eye as closely as possible with respect to tone mapper, EV, rates of change maybe of EV, have you looked into that?
Yeah, so you're saying like when you go inside and then you go outside and but you like...
Yeah, exactly, but also the hard limits to say that, you know, if you go above a certain brightness, a human eye would saturate, and then at a lower threshold, you can't see anymore, and then maybe certain wavelengths of light the eyes are more sensitive to, so maybe reds and oranges towards lower intensity lighting. And so I try and do, in my line of work, mimicry of industrial environments, and lighting is one of those conversations we have around construction and nighttime operations. So having something that mimics the human eye is always a conversational piece.
Yeah, so you you know, take this and then use it with like a post-process material or something. But again, Chris, like the Cine camera has a lot of extra kind of things on top of that, which can go down that route. But again, in this talk, it was like just adding more and more and more onto it, and it's kind of less about all of those bits and just, this is the lighting, this is the tone mapper, this is how it relates to that, and then this is what you can do after. And I found that when I do that, people go, oh, I get it.
Anyone else? Oh, hang on, I'll get you next. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious about your methodology using this sort of similar process on a dynamic day-night system. Would it still be the same sort of thing, or would you blend between different post-process volumes given time of day sort of thing?
Dynamic day time system. I would probably, I mean, you could just be a blueprint, because, yeah, I don't use that many values when doing it. You could see like from bright daylight to here, it was literally just a few values. And then if you want to do nighttime, it's a handful of values that you would change. So in a blueprint, you would just say, okay, at this certain time, adjust this. Also, this isn't taking into account all the sky atmosphere, and you change it and it does a lot of things. But if you're just doing certain, you know, game dev on mobile, say for instance, right, this works. If you're doing it with baked lighting, this works, right? If you're doing it with Lumen, obviously this works. And then you can take in all the other stuff, which adds all the bells and whistles on top of that. But I find that quite often we can get mixed up in the weeds of the features, as opposed to like, this is how it works on this fundamental level. Because, you know, if you're lighting for this and then you do your bake lighting, it's still, when you open up the scene, you're still going through the tone mapper with the light maps, and you have to adjust that. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay.
There was a hand over here that I promised would be next. It was yours.
Just wondering about busier lighting environments, say things with a lot of emissive sources like that wonderful piece of light art next to you. Any good ways of controlling kind of that noise that tends to come in and the pollution from that?
From emissive lights?
Yeah, when you seem to have like a nightclub or a street in Tokyo kind of scene, I seem to get a lot of artifacts and stuff.
Yeah, so from my understanding from Daniel Wright and his team who wrote the system, like at this point, don't do that. I think you can use like tube lights and place them around to help with that. So it's like your emissive material is this is the light and it's giving off a little bit, and then the actual light illuminates the scene.
Just for clarity, do you mean from screen space, or do you mean the lighting artifacts you're seeing from Lumen itself?
More just the balance of material, and it seems that tends like
Okay, so like the emissive material injection and such?
Yeah, so I'm not lighting the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
Are
okay.
you talking about like this stuff here?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so that's just an emissive material, and Lumen is just working really hard to try and resolve that. So it's kind of like adding it all together, and you can do it, but, you know.
Anyone else?
With permission, Sean, can I hijack that last question and answer it, if that's okay?
Pardon?
Can I answer that question? Because
Of
it
course
kind of
you can.
answers the other one
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you go to your post-process and then go down to
just-
global illumination, there's things like your gather settings and lumen strength. Now, be warned, in a game context, these things are very expensive.
Hang on, just for context, Tyson is our cinematics lighting person. Okay. I built
Just
the
go
tool.
down to, it's under GI if you scroll down.
Oh, it's under GI.
Yeah, scroll down. It's down, 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 down.
Hang on.
Down, down, there you go. Global illumination. So yeah, if you go under, Lumen global illumination. So in here, you've got a bunch of different settings, like you've got the scene lighting and what's that say, the second one down, it's like the
Scene
scene
detail.
details and stuff. If you actually play with those values, they are exponential. So if you just drag that up to 4, the lumen crawling and that kind of effect that you'll see will improve dramatically, and it'll also, to answer that other question, will update lumen faster,
Hang on, let me just delete
but it's
this
expensive.
Hang
So if you're doing it in the context of like virtual production or a film, then really effective. In games, I'd be careful about using it that way, but in the exact same way, Sean's been showing how so much of our lighting can be controlled in post-processing. Lumen's the exact same thing with these controls here. And you can do that in order to basically influence
let's
and
just break
manipulate
it.
those effects. But yeah, just GI. Go into global illumination and move those sliders back and forth, and you'll see pretty noticeable changes in the way that the lumen quality works. So,
It's heaps noticeable.
sorry to hijack that off you, man.
No. That's not changing.
Any other-
Tyson. Can I hijack and show you something that doesn't work?
This is for naming and shaming later. Your hand up. Sorry, wait, don't come back to you in a minute.
Thank you for that.
No worries.
Just going off you were saying before, I'm a photographer who also works in virtual production, so I don't know how much you're going to like this question at 4:45. Do you have any advice on grading and getting that more color accurate for something like Rec 709, which is typically what we work in?
So.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's quite a simple question. Again, the Epic folk are... So if you bring your company logo into Unreal, and even if you go into Unlit, it's like not the same color. So that's being worked on to actually get better color accuracy. Does that answer your question? Oh, that was easy. Am I right there, Chris?
Yeah, I haven't been on that side of things, to be honest. I generally have been in world building itself and outside of lighting, so this is your area, not mine. Cool, we have time for a couple more. Otherwise, we can all escape day 2 a couple of minutes early. It
So
looks
just
like
with these resources here, I have that light chart that I had, and there's also all of my details, and I have being a technical artist, I have a couple of resources there on like normals and what are normals and all that kind of stuff. Also, Gameloft is hiring, so if you talk to Dan Creevy down here if you're interested.
all right. With that, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Anyone, one more? All right, thank you very much.
Just before we all scoot, just a heads up that, again, there is a closing night party at 6 p.m. at the Roof Lodge. Apparently it's really close, although I am not from here, so I don't know which of said roofs it is. But you should all have it in your agenda to check it out. I just want to say a personal thanks so much for everybody coming. This has been a labor of love for the last couple of months to get this all together, but it's been really lovely to see it come together so well with so many people from so many disciplines, from Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, and sometimes even further. So thank you all very much. I can't stress enough just how much from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the closing night in a couple of hours.
And also thanks these folks for putting all this together and dealing with us.
All right.